Hey there, today's episode is brought to you by Samaritan Ministries, a community of Christians who care for one another spiritually and financially when a medical need arises. It's biblical, affordable healthcare sharing. You can learn more at samaritanministries.org/The Forgotten Podcast.
Meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is The Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to The Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Well, we know that youth in and out of foster care are a very vulnerable population and at risk for human trafficking, for sex trafficking. Tiffani, you know this on a personal level. You are a survivor of human trafficking, and not only that, but of SRA, which is Satanic Ritual Abuse. You deeply understand the many difficulties facing this vulnerable population, and you're passionate about making a difference. In fact, you founded an organization, a ministry called GloryB to help support other survivors. And Tiffani, I just thank you so much for your willingness to come on today and for being here to share your story.
Thank you.
You, I just shared, are a survivor. You're a survivor of some horrific things, human trafficking, satanic ritual abuse. Do you mind starting by just even defining what these are for those who don't know?
Trafficking is defined by the use of a person in the means of force, fraud, or coercion. But like I was saying, I'd love to go deeper in that. Mm-hmm. And that trafficking is that I'm going to use and put myself as gains and put my will upon you for my selfish gain. Mm-hmm. And it's just, if we can start by agreeing that we're not going to use people for any means. And so you don't start with trafficking and most people are like, oh, I woke up today and I decided to traffic people. Right, it's those small decisions that we say yes to every day when we're presented with the opportunity to look at a magazine that, maybe shows a little bit more of a man or a woman, or that we are now sexualizing this, or that's not enough. So we gratify that and we're like, okay, well, maybe if we look at something that's a more soft porn, and then we choose hard porn, and then those are not fulfilling our needs, and we're now trapped in this cycle. And so I'm not saying that not every person, it jumps to A to B, but usually it's a progressive way that we just start and we fall into this trap of, oh my gosh, I'm down this vicious cycle. And I'll really believe it's those small decisions where where we're putting our, mind and what we're watching and what we're intaking, that we start justifying that these actions are okay. So when the opportunity where someone is in a vulnerable situation for us to take advantage of, we've already said yes to all of these smaller things, that when we're able to make that leap, it doesn't seem like such of a leap anymore.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for defining that. I had never heard of satanic ritual abuse before. What is that?
So what I experienced with satanic ritual abuse is everything that we have learned and you have learned that Christ has done for you is under the belief system that that Satan has done for me. And so it took and still has taken years to unwire those thought process and belief systems. And so it definitely encompasses some dark things that go with that. And some things that I would go far as to say is that satanic ritual abuse is the most horrendous type of human trafficking or forced trafficking. There are just things that no one of any age should be forced to witness or forcibly partake in. And in those times, and as I was growing up, I feared for my life daily. I understood that my life would end at any moment. And I lived in that constant fear. But not only mine, those around me. I didn't make friends. I didn't do all of those things because I knew that circle of people, I didn't have that consistent person. I intentionally, and it was almost programmatically, like, you are isolated in this cult and trauma.
I know that sometimes we think of trafficking victims being removed from their home, taken. And sometimes it can happen where the child is actually still living at home, but it's such a mind thing too. How did you find yourself in this situation? Anything you're comfortable sharing of kind of when you realized?
Yeah. So I think most of us have seen that movie Taken, and it's enamoring. But the reality is that although that happens, and I'm not saying that it does, it's a very low number. The easiest way to traffic someone is to groom them. And so that is by me, as if I am, the perpetrator, exploiting someone as far as seeing, okay, what's that next? What are they asking for? Do I see a gap where a parent's not there? Do I see a gap where they're wanting something tangible? Are they wanting attention? All of those things. And so that is how, and honestly, it is usually someone that is close in the family circle that has intentionally put themselves in that family circle to gain access to that victim. And for me, my trafficking started as familial trafficking. And what that was is that I was adopted from the Philippines by a Canadian and an American, and they were married. And honestly, from birth, I grew up only knowing sex trafficking. I was constantly told that they adopted me for the sole purpose of that. And so I had no difference. And unfortunately, familial trafficking is growing, and it's not uncommon. And a lot of people are like, oh, that happens overseas. Well, all of my trafficking happened here in this region, mostly in Texas. And so the reality is that trafficking has happened in every single state. It has happened in beautiful closed-door gated communities to the rural areas. And so we have to be able to be, I'm not saying that like keep your kids under, lock and key, but be vigilant and understand like who they're talking to online. Understanding that like autonomy of body and who are we allowing to be around those that we love.
Yeah. Wow. So your adoptive parents were your traffickers.
Yeah.
You said they shared with you all growing up that this is why. Like, were they that bold and that blatant?
Yes. Yes. And so there's that ruthlessness that comes in that. And just as we believe that God is all-encompassing in love, and not, we also know there's that polar opposite of darkness and hatred and that mean spirited and coolness. And so there is that. And so I think as Christians, we focus on that bright side, and there is hope in the Lord, and I found freedom in him. But at the same time, we also have to acknowledge that there are darker forces, out there, and not everyone, the Lord says that, not everyone that calls out Lord, Lord is going to go, and that the Lord also said that the path on him was few and the road are many, and we forget that. And I was immersed in a culture where the road to hell was many, and I saw that it was a very eye-opening experience for me, and it shaped who I was as a person and who I am as a person.
Absolutely. At what age do you feel like, was there a point when you're like, this isn't a normal way of living, this isn't right? Or was it, when did you start to recognize?
I'm going to jump forward into my story a little bit. So at 29, I was adopted. I went into foster care. And then I exited foster care, and by the act of, by just Jesus himself, I landed up in a church, and got a community, and walked alongside two women in community for about 10 years. The woman that joined our group actually legally adopted me at 29. So I'm readopted, and we're a family, and that's who I live with now. But one thing will always stick out in my mind is that right after my adoption with her, and, my traffickings, with my parental family, my first adopted family was from birth until about 5th grade. And I remember after the adoption, we left, and, we were excited. But the next day, at 29, I remember calling up my mom and saying, okay, I'm ready to be trafficked again, because that was the mindset. And how my mom, now was like, oh, we still have work to do. And so, and for years, if she would talk about, we have to tighten our budget, your budget, I'd be like, okay, so let's go sell myself.
Wow, it was so ingrained.
So ingrained. And so, I'm 37 now, and I still sometimes struggle with that, but I can stop it at that thought. Thank you, Jesus. But it is so ingrained, and I have to fight that, and, to say, okay, no, my value is not my body, and I am, no matter what people do, I'm still treasured. And so that's a struggle for me. That's a struggle not to go there, because it is so ingrained, but I really believe that I will get complete freedom in this, and I do, but it is hard. I'm not, so yes, it's ingrained. And when you're in that lifestyle, it is hard to fight that innate feeling of okay, well, I can go turn a trick, and I can bring this much in, and not putting your worth in what your body is, because that's what we're used to. And so, to answer your question, long story short, is that it's a work in progress.
Hey, a quick word from our sponsor, Samaritan Ministries. God's love is steadfast and true. He cares for us, and he calls us to care for one another. And Samaritan Ministries connects hundreds of thousands of Christians across the nation who come together through prayer, encouragement, and financial support when a medical need arises. It's not insurance, and there are no networks, so you get to choose the healthcare providers and treatments that best meet your family's needs. Your medical bills are sent to Samaritan Ministries, and then they notify fellow members to pray for you and send money directly to you to help pay those bills. When the body of Christ comes together to pray, encourage, and provide for one another, burdens are lifted and God is glorified. This applies to all areas of life, including healthcare. You can learn more at samaritanministries.org/The Forgotten Podcast, and we want to say a very special thank you to Samaritan Ministries for sponsoring today's episode. Now, back to the show.
Wow, Tiffani, I am so sorry that you've walked through so much. And I'm so grateful that you have found Jesus, and that he has known you all along, and he's I think these are some of the harder things in Christianity to understand, right? It's the big question. Why does a good God allow such horrific things to happen? Is that a question that you've been able to find peace with?
That's a question that I've cried myself to sleep at many nights, and I've been angry at God, and I've been angry with people. But he's been so sweet to me. And I see his provision through my life in so many situations where I should have been dead, and providing me a mom, providing me with friends, and it is. But it's a constant choice to say, okay, am I going to look at all the things that I don't have, or the things that I missed, or the things that I'm angry at, or I'm going to choose to look at what I do have? And it's definitely practice. And, that automatic negative thought. It's not easy. I struggle with it on a daily basis. Trafficking comes with a lot of baggage. It comes with suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation. It comes with a heaviness of being isolated and alone. And all the things that Satan wants us to, to succeed in. Right. But I still have to look at and say, okay, what is going right? And I get it right, 80% of the time, and 20% of the time is that human error. And the times that I don't, I still have to be transparent and understand, in my feelings are misleading. If I go based on how I feel that, but I have a wonderful work community where I can be transparent and honest. I have family and friends that can speak truth to me when I do feel that way. So definitely it's one of those things that's ongoing, a work in progress.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a constant turning the mind back towards Jesus. It's a building new ruts in the brain, right? Because for so long, there were these ruts of, I make money by doing this. This is my job. This is my role. This is who I am, right?
Right.
Even as a victim in the midst of trafficking, do you feel like there comes a point when you're just kind of numb to what's happening? Or is it that you just, and almost like you just accept it to survive, sort of thing? Or what kind of goes on in the mind of a child and even young adult as you're walking through this?
I mean, you don't leave trafficking without some sort of psychological damage. You can't. I've known people to literally just, drugs and alcohol is extremely prevalent in that. And that's another way that pimps and traffickers use, because if I can get you addicted to this, you won't leave because you'll need that fix again. And so that's another way. But it also, it's I'm in la la land while this is happening. And you literally disassociate, and there's disassociation disorder. As far as that, I really believe that it's God's gift to be able to dissociate from what is happening to you. There's amnesia. I've met people that completely have blocked out times in their life, and there has been seasons where I've been blocked out of things that have just happened to me. I've seen paralysis in body parts. I've seen it show up in so many ways. So yes, it does affect, but it affects your ability to trust. It affects your ability not to question, okay, well, what do you want from me? It affects your ability to understand love in a way that's not okay. What am I exchanging for this? It does. And for a long time, it affected how I saw people, how I saw God, because of that. And so, I guess my encouragement for those that are in churches is to, you never know what someone's going through. And so, if you know someone that has been through something that's, sexual abuse and that, it's a hard recovery. And we just need people to say, to be diligent and to be steadfast and saying, no matter what you do, I'm still going to love you because, what happened to you isn't you. Yeah. And, if you see maladaptive behavior that you don't like, is to walk alongside them, not condemn them or shame them.
Oh, amen to that. How were you rescued out of this?
I had said a remark to a teacher that I just thought was normal. And in that setting, it sparked a numerous of okay. And I was still left in that family's home for some time, but it ended up where finally, after some suicide attempts and things like that, that I was taken before a judge, and the judge asked me, where do I want to live? Do I want to go back to my adoptive parents' house at that point? And I was like, no, I'd rather live in Child Protective Services. And I say this because it's really important if you were a first responder or CPS worker, is that I was told over and over, living in Child Protective Services, that what they would do to me in Child Protective Services is way worse than what I was living. So I had this perpetual fear of there's nowhere safe to go. And so just remember, when you're seeing okay, why are they afraid to go with me? It's because what is that perpetrator speaking about you? They're not oh yeah, these are these great people that are going to give you another life. Right. And so, I was, even though I knew that this was something terrible and terrifying, I was I can't stay here. And, I thank God for that, putting that negative truth, because, yes, I did enter foster care, and I was so, my foster care experience wasn't, it wasn't glamorous. It was hard. But at the same time, it opened up so many more doors for me, and I understood, that not everybody was there to hurt me, and that started that process. But as I got older, I was able to look back on it and see favor. But sometimes when you're going through it, you can't. You're not able to see that. Yeah,
you're too close to it. I think, it's a cliche for a reason, but hindsight is 20/20, right? I mean, it's true. You don't know until you look back sometimes and go, oh, or you get a little more life experience under your belt or new experiences. You said you've specifically struggled. You've talked about loving others, even trusting others, all of that. How has God been redeeming that for you?
I would definitely say my adopted mom has been I have done everything to push this woman away. But because she loves me so well, and because I honestly see Christ in everything that she does. And that's the thing, our actions either point us to Christ or point someone away from Christ. And, she's not perfect by any means, but her love for me has been able to open up my eyes for how God could love me, and how that he can redeem. And because she showed me how to trust, I was able to see how God, and all of those things, and able to open up my sphere of friends and trust one more. And it has been hey, you befriend this person and we'll befriend them together. I mean, it's been such a redeeming relationship. And, you know, I feel so blessed to have what I have, because a lot of people in my situation don't have that. But, you know, I understood evil, like, to the core. I just had to believe that there was something else out there. I just didn't know what it was. I didn't understand that. And I went on a spiritual journey of looking for, you know, is there a God? What is there a God? And, you know, a friend of mine was like, ask whatever, you know, to reveal himself to you. And he did, in a mighty way that was very personal to me in that space. And so I did, but he did reveal himself, but I didn't take that step in, like, trusting God and saying, I want to make, you know, I believe that you're my Lord and Savior. I didn't do any of that. And people would ask me for years, like, hey, like, I'd love to, you know, save and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm angry at God. Why would he? No. And for years. And so at one time, and I was going to Watermark Church, and I was sitting at the 5 o'clock service and sitting on the couch. And a lady was like, do you want to get saved? I was like, no, I don't want to be saved. I'm okay with going to hell. I just am angry with God. And she said, you know, you can still be angry with God and accept him. And no one ever explained that to me. No one. And I was like, okay. And so she's like, well, pray this prayer with me. And she did it. And she's like, did you say it? I was like, no, I didn't know what I was committing myself to. So, like, she said it again. And it wasn't this, like, oh, this revelation of change. It took years, and still to, you know, chip at all the things that I've hardened my heart with over the years. But has been a slow refining process. And it's my story with the Lord has definitely been a love comes softly story, but it did come, you know, and that's the part of my story that, like, I celebrate, is that it did come, you know.
Wow. And as you have received his love, I mean, you are now sharing his love with so many through this nonprofit. Tell us a little more about your nonprofit.
So I started GloryB my junior year of college.
Okay.
I was living at a safe home, and I was just like, man, like, I met another young lady that had a similar past as me, and she had been passed off by so many people, and we connected, and I was just like, we don't have this space for that. And I, even in my healing, if you mention, hey, will you take this client that has SRA, they could have, they're taking psychotropic meds, they have dissociative identity disorder, they have, extreme PTSD, all of that. And there are a lot of homes that will say no, because of the care need is too high. And so in my heart, I just felt the Lord put in my heart is to open a home, and so we're still in this space. This is a fundraising to have a home, but to be able to let someone truly heal, for some years, and then learn skills to be able to get back on their feet and things like that. But the second part that I saw as my friends and I were, exiting the line was that they would complete a program and then go back to the life. And I would, run into them or check in with them a couple of years later. And I'm like, hey, what's up? And they're like, hey, girl, I'm back in the life. And I was like, well, why? And she's like, well, I left ABC program, but after I left, they were done with me. And so I created a space where a survivor is that are living independently. Independently, it means just without living, getting services from agencies. Like you can not live, you can like, but you're not like living there getting services. But if you're on your own or whatever, and you're living, you know, with a roommate or whatever, that. And so we created this space where it's like this night of the round table effect. We're not one to hire anyone, that we just come and we're able to talk about what is going on and what is real, as far as like, hey, like, finding a job, you know, is triggering because maybe I'm around men a lot and that's hard for me. Or maybe it is, you know what, like I want to date. Okay, me too. I want to date. I want to find a husband, but I don't know what a healthy man looks like. And so we started to understand, started doing our Bible study called Safe People, just understanding, okay, what does a healthy man look like? And exploring that. And like, what, you know, what do we look at a healthy, for a healthy husband? And that, and that we can also share like our mistakes and say like, hey, you know what, like I struggled with lying this week, or I struggled with, you know, wanting to go back on the life because, you know, I was $50 short on rent. And so, you know, we've been able to meet those immediate needs and have that community around holidays, especially like holidays are so hard for many survivors just because it reminds them of sometimes the kids that they don't have custody of anymore, or they've lost, or the family. And so I open in my home, and it is like, you come as you are. If you want to bring some, great. If you can't, great. But it gives them that sense of belonging in that family, and that they can reach out at any time in building those relationships organically. And that there's just something that, like, as I'm saying to another survivor, that I just understand, like, hey, like, I understand that working 40 hours a week, trying to find a counselor outside of working 40 hours a week, and dealing with every mental and like body memories and all that, that I understand that most people wouldn't. And that's so comforting in this group, is that we all understand it.
Yeah. Wow. It's incredible. You mentioned you're hoping with dreaming to have a home. Is there a way people could donate if, as they hear this, they would love to be a part of this?
Yes. So if you go to GloryB, .org and the donate button.
Great.
Yeah, you know, there is that option that to donate, and anything that is not too small for you know, for us. We're just thankful to be able to serve and just love this population well.
Wow. I do want to ask, because I see other moms on the other end of this, hearing this or watching this on YouTube, or dads or people who love kids, whatever. And they're going, what signs should I be looking for in my kids? Or what does grooming look like? Like, where do I start in making sure mine are safe?
So first of all, I think having a conversation that's age appropriate, like for your kids, you know, as they're progressively getting older, of what trafficking looks like, what is trafficking, what parts of your body should no one touch. Like no one should be trusting your top chest. No one should be touching your private parts. You know, at a certain age, like, you know, mommies and daddies shouldn't be touching that, and no one that, and creating a space for them to come and talk. Like, if anyone does, this is a safe space to talk about that. The second thing is that grooming typically starts on devices. And I'm not saying that, but being aware of what your child is texting or sending out, or that. And one of the examples that I give is that we live in a culture, you know, where before, you know, it used to be what's done in our house stays in our house. And then I grew up in a culture where we're like, okay, like we're talking about things a little bit more, but now the culture has shifted to we now talk about it and post everything. And so I always say, like, be careful what you post, like in and out, like as a youth and a child, when you're like, oh, my parents suck because they didn't give, they didn't upgrade and give me, I've had a bad day. You don't understand. Okay. Well, as someone that may be a predator, I'm looking at is saying like, okay, this is my end to like side with this person as far as, hey, tell me, I'll get you this phone. But you just have to like meet me, halfway or outside. And I will say that grooming is it can be, depending on if that person is, Lord, give me the words. What is that person? A vulnerable population. That grooming process could be quicker. So we're looking at foster youth, homeless youth, LGBTQ community, trans community, parents that are not at home. So we have those higher youth that have been incarcerated, things like that are our higher population at risk. But then at the same time, you still have to be vigilant about knowing what you're, even if you are a tier 2 parent household, of like, who's texting my child when I am going over to their friend's house, like, do I know the parents and things like that. But I will say, grooming starts, with sometimes gaining the trust of the parent, and gaining the trust of, and we've seen time and time again where it's a teacher, it's a deacon, it's that. And so it's never, for me, it's like, okay, I never think of like this person, it can never happen to this person. And so, where we blindly trust someone, and we still say, hey, and check in with our kids. Hey, I noticed that you visited, Tanya today. How did that visit go? Did you feel comfortable? Things like that. We want to look out and things of signs where like someone is overcommitting to like spending time with you or your child, not in that weird way of like, oh, are you busy tonight? I'll take your kid to school. I'll do this. Like continue, and it's that over, that over commitment of stuff that's beyond like, okay,
like a normal helping hand or whatever.
Listen to if you're a believer, like listen to that, that gut check in your spirit, in your heart of like, hey, something's not right, or I just don't feel, I feel this off sense about things. And I'll send you some links and that'll talk about, okay, what different steps of grooming. Love bombing is one of them. Like, oh, how much I love you, how much I care for you. That manipulation of, if you do this, you do this. So having your child understand, really important, like what does manipulation look like? What does manipulation look like from an adult to a kid? What manipulation look like from kid to kid? All of those things, and opening up those lines of communication of that, and then looking up, and I'll send you those links about what grooming, like, hey, these are these steps of like what grooming can look like. And again, like I do believe that, children should have an adult, someone they trust outside their family to be able to talk to, because, and I always encourage that, like have someone that's a friend that is not linked, that's not, so that your kid, if something ever happened to you, that your child does have someone to be able to talk to, that that you trust, that that is going to instill the values that you have with your child, and that your child can go to them and say, hey, this happened, or if this is coming up with them. And and when I say this, and even in the life that I live, I don't want to instill fear or that this world doesn't have loving and genuine people to offer. They do. And I don't want anyone to leave here feeling like they have to hide their children and hide in fear of that, because fear is not, from the Lord.
That's right.
But at the same time, it's also just being aware and just saying, okay, like, these are the steps that I am going to take to be vigilant.
Yeah, be alert. That is, the Bible does tell us that too. Be alert. The devil is, I'm not going to quote it exactly right, but he is prowling around like a roaring lion, right? Be watchful. And at the same time, I do appreciate that it isn't, God says there's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out all fear.
Right.
Man, Tiffani, this has been very eye-opening for me. I just appreciate you sharing this, because I know this is very tender, very personal. And I just want to thank you for entrusting us to be able to share your story here. I would love, as we close out here, speak to the women, the girls that are listening to this, and maybe they're in this, they don't even quite realize yet, or those who have been rescued out of it. What do you want to share with them?
You were so loved by our amazing Father. And I know sometimes that word Father has been tainted into something hard and horrible. And my prayer for you is that word be renewed into something that is rich, that is joyful, and brings peace. My encouragement to you is that you are not alone in this, and to seek counsel, and to talk to someone that you trust, and share your story, because Satan wants us to be alone. Satan wants us to put the lid on that. But in that, when we sit in silence, it breeds secrecy. We have those negative thoughts that come with that. If you're struggling with psychological things, emotional, friendships, relationships, you're not alone. And you are worth it. You are worth fighting for. You are worth being seen, and you are worthy of love. And that's something that, it's hard to receive, and I understand that. But one thing that someone did for me that I would like to do for you is I would like to hold hope for you. And until you're ready to take it back, I will hold this hope for you. And you can email me at Tiffani, Tiffani, at GloryB.org, and I would love to connect with you, no matter where you are in the States, or in the world. And you still have a purpose in this life. You still are worthy. And what has been done to you does not define you.
Right. Tiffani, thank you so very, very much for being on today.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.